You're watching the Letterman Podcast with Mike Chisholm, endorsed by the Hello Deli.
Yeah.
La, la, la.
Welcome to the Letterman Podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. We have got a good one for you today. I don't know that I would say that about any other of the podcast. I wouldn't say that, I should say, about any of the other podcasts that we have. I think I say that probably every single time. The ones I don't like are the ones that are just me. I like the ones with the guests. Today is a good guest. They're all good guests. Goddamn, how do I edify this one and make it seem special by not overshadowing everybody else? They're all special. That's it right there. Jeremy Weiner, no relation to Stephen Weiner, by the way. Wouldn't that be cool? Like the grandson, the illegitimate grandson, the son, I don't know. But Jeremy Weiner, no relation. The spelling is different, or is it? Is that just to keep us off the scent? I don't know. All I know is it's another whiner, and another writer who is a whiner. Jeremy Weiner is phenomenal. He worked for The Late Show well over 15 years, and researcher, segment producer, went to all sorts of small towns with Biff Henderson. By the way, might have some, never mind. Shout out to James. James, how you doing? There you go. Anyway, nobody knows what that means until hopefully very soon. And in very soon, hopefully you'll know what that means. That being said, Jeremy, all sorts of fun stuff. Calvert DeForest was his handler for a while too. Another whiner who has worked with Calvert DeForest. Just lots of really good things in this episode. He told so many stories. We set up the next time he's going to be on his next episode. We've already got a premise for it. It's going to be great. The other cool thing is he is a fellow Kevin Smith aficionado. So not only did he cut his teeth with Conan O'Brien, actually, moved over to Late Show, stayed there till the end of the run. And then, he's been doing some awesome stuff. We talk about a little bit about some of the things that he's working on now. But one of the things that he did was he was a judge for Kevin Smith's film festival in New Jersey, which I thought was really cool. He frequents some of the haunts that Kevin Smith made famous, like the Quick Stop and some other things as well. I love that. If you don't know anything about Kevin Smith, you probably are not digging what I'm saying in this intro, but that's really it. I hope you all had a good Christmas holiday season for those of you who partake. My wife got me some pink Jordans, so there you go. I love them. They're fantastic. Met Lou Ferrigno, played the Hulk, met him over the holiday season, so that was kind of fun. That's for the podcast. Good luck with the podcast we got there. And looks like he's going to come on the Men's Mental Wellness Podcast. And when that happens, then, if he's got a Letterman story. So we might get some Lou Ferrigno stuff. Loved everything that the Letterman channel put out. Like right now, big clap for Walter Kim and the team over at the Letterman YouTube channel. Great stuff out. Lots of very, very good things. And I'll tell you this, the Darlene the love for Darlene Love, that sounds a little less confusing, over this holiday season from the official channel, incredible, really special stuff. Love that. Trying to get Brian Tedda on because Darlene Love was on The View, and I want to talk to him about Darlene Love while it's still fresh in the mind. Seeing if we can make that happen. Got lots of good things coming. You know what? I said at the top of this intro that it is a really, really good episode. It is. They all are. Jeremy Weiner is just another friend, another brother from another mother, I feel like. I'll tell you this. I watched Bathtubs Over Broadway again over the holidays. And there's a scene in it where Steve Young, well, of course, Steve Young, the whole movie's wrapped around the mighty Steve Young. Mighty Steve Young. There you go. If he was a pro wrestler, that might be his name right there. Although he would come up with something way more clever. Hey, let's ask him. We should ask Steve Young. Actually, yeah, let's do this right now. This will be fun, right? I think. Let's see here. Okay, there's Steve Young right there. And we'll do this. Hey, Steve, it's Mike, smiley face. Right now, we're shooting an intro for Jeremy Weiner's episode. And I decided to ask you a question, real time, as part of this intro. Period. If you had a pro wrestler name for yourself, what would it be? Question mark. My vote is Mighty Steve Young. Period. What say you? Question mark. Send. All right. So we sent that to Steve Young. And we'll see what happens in the next intro for the next show if we have an answer. All right. Kind of a way that we can go chronological order on this thing, or who knows, maybe the other episode comes out first. No, this episode's going to come out first. We'll see what happens. Anyway, when Steve answers, we will let you know. Now, I watched Bathtubs Over Broadway. Steve Young, the movie, of course, wrapped around him. And then there's a scene where he's interacting with Lee Ellenberg and Joe Grossman and Jeremy Weiner. And I got to tell you, holy crap, does that movie ever have more weight? If you really want to go down a Letterman rabbit hole, watch the Joe Grossman episode, watch the Lee Ellenberg episode, watch this episode, and then watch Bathtubs Over Broadway. And like the scene where Steve says goodbye to Joe Grossman, it broke me up. Like, it's like he's saying goodbye to him on the last day for the last time. Steve's like, "Oh, Joe, you're my little buddy." Just like, oh my God, I'm crying. Thank God I can, send messages to both these guys anytime and we can still talk to them. Very grateful to do that. Jeremy Weiner is part of that crew. He is, and he's got some great stories. And I'm just messing with you. I'm just teasing you. Let's get to it. The Letterman Podcast brought to you by the good folks at the Hello Deli, Rupert G. and May Chin at the Hello Deli. hello-deli.com if you want to get any Late Show with David Letterman merchandise or Rupert shirts, or maybe he'll prepackage a bagel or something for you. I don't know. You want to get food? Less efficient, but pretty darn cool. And you support the good people at the Hello Deli. I'm just very grateful for everybody here. And this is a lot of fun. Without further ado, I bid to you my conversation with Jeremy Weiner here on the Letterman Podcast. Oh, yeah. Work for Letterman. When did you start? Like, when was your first inkling there?
I interned at the show. I got my internship in the summer of 98.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it was the summer of 98. Prior to that, the previous year, I'd interned at Late Night with Conan O'Brien. So I did back-to-back late night internships, which is kind of rare. And I sort of got the vibe that, like, why are you doing another late night internship when I went there? But, Dave was always the guy for me. Do you know what I mean? Like, I loved Conan. He was awesome. But I just remember being in my bedroom when I was when I got my first TV in my room, and it would every night before bed, it's watch the top 10 list, go to bed and get up and go to school the next day. It was like such a ritual for me,
Okay. What year were you born?
1977.
Okay, I'm a 76 baby. So
yeah.
I'm fascinated by this. Like, when we had Grossman on not too long ago too, I said this because I was such a fan like you when I was a kid, watching these adults act childishly, for lack of a better term, but silly. They're adults acting silly. And it was a cool experience because I stayed with Dave the whole way. And it was so cool to see his staffers literally morph into people who were more my age. Like, I loved that.
Yeah.
Being from Western Canada, I never had I didn't even have the idea that I could go and intern for this show that I loved so much, and then maybe I could actually work there. When did that first occur to you? And did you try to intern with Dave first, and then went over to 30 Rock after that, or was it at the same time?
No,
how did this start for you?
I grew up in northwestern Pennsylvania, in Erie, Pennsylvania, which is right between Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, like right in the middle.
Yep.
And I ended up going to Syracuse because I was at a car dealership when my parents were buying a car when I was a kid, and the Syracuse was playing on the TV when they left me in the waiting room. I just fell in love with Syracuse basketball, and that became my thing. I always wanted to go to Syracuse. And so I applied and was lucky enough to get in. And so I went to Syracuse to study sports broadcasting.
Oh, wow.
And because I was a big Bob Costas fan. And when I got there, I found out, like, Bob Costas had gone there but dropped out to go do minor league hockey games in, like, St. Louis. And, the broadcast journalism program really wasn't my bag. So I started doing like the television, radio, film program. That's what I transferred and changed my major to. And I started working at the campus TV station. It was called UUTV. I linked up with a bunch of guys who were doing a late night show called Coast to Coast. It was hosted by Jack Helmuth, and there was a guy named Rob LaPlante who directed it. And Jack had interned at The Tonight Show out in LA, and then he had interned at Conan. And that's when I sort of got the real late night bug. Like, that's where I had my first writer's room meeting. It was in Watson Hall at Syracuse University with like the guys who wrote for Coast to Coast. It was like the coolest thing coming in as a freshman to be able to join a late night show. And so I ended up interning at Conan in the summer of '97. And after that, that's where.
How'd you get in? How did you just apply for it? You just luckily got it? Did you
know somebody? As I said, Jack Helmuth, who was at Syracuse with me, had interned there the summer before, and I didn't even know a lot about internships or anything like that. So Syracuse had like a building that focused, like a building on campus that was, you can go and look up all these different internships that were available. And so I applied to a bunch of different places. I think I applied to like Howard Stern's E! Show and a few different other places. So I went to the city. I made like a weekend trip, and I interviewed on Monday at like 3 or 4 different places. And ended up getting the Conan offer. I think Jack, was obviously instrumental, probably putting in a word for me there. And so each step of the way, there was always someone I met that sort of helped steer the path. Do you know what I mean? Like when I was at Conan, there was a cue card guy named Mark Lucas who did cue cards at Letterman with Tony Mendez. And so when I applied at Letterman, I think he was nice enough to put in a word, with Janice Panino when I was applying for that whole process. So it was just interesting how it sort of, the chips just, fell into place.
They sure did. What was your role for Coast to Coast? Was it literally PA starting to learn this stuff? It
was awesome. When you got in, I was able to start. There weren't a ton of people that were as enthusiastic, I don't think, to do this kind of work. And so I was helping to produce that show my freshman and sophomore year. And it was pretty wild. It was, it was like, trying to book the star players on the basketball team. It was trying to, find a rabbi and a Santa Claus for the Christmas episode. It was all kinds of stuff. And as a freshman in college, you're like, what is happening? But I just remember it being like, immensely, just to be a part of something like that, and the show had all these, like Bob Costas did a cold open because he was on campus giving a tour or, giving an interview to some students. Like Andy Richter did a segment because Jack had interned at the, at Conan. So it was really like a cool show that we shot a lot of pre-taped bits, and it was really neat.
Oh man. And all the while still a Letterman fan while you were there?
Oh, for sure. It was one of those things, like I made sure in the dorm, we stopped down and watched, the top 10, and then we watched Conan's, as much of Conan as we could. So
that was me too. Like by 98, Dave had ascended, passed out of the NBC. Became what the shorthand on this show that we call Powerful Dave. And he's at that point, he's got this freight train of momentum and the 1-2 punch. I love the 1-2 punch of your guys' years. In fact, I would probably even give it the edge. I loved Letterman Ferguson, but back then Letterman O'Brien was my years worth of every ritual almost every single night watching those guys. When I was at Conan, seeing like,
I was the script intern. So that was my first introduction to what it was like with writers, professional comedy writers. And it was awesome. And it was like, every time there was a change in the script, I was the guy that had to go bring it to the different departments. So I got to know everybody on the staff. And then like right before the show, if they're doing a Clutch Cargo and Robert Smigel's there, I'm in the dressing room as he's doing rewrites. And then I'm running them to cue cards and to Jonathan Groff, who was the head writer at the time. And it was just, it was awe-inspiring because you're just seeing all these great comedy professionals, and I'm just like, this is incredible. So
the excitement really of being in that environment, very few things like that excitement, just that energy that's there, knowing that you're starting a show. Let me ask you this. I know with you guys at Late Show, you guys ran it like it was a live show. That was kind of you had that energy up there like it was live. Was Conan like that as well by that point?
Yeah, I mean, it was the energy and like backstage before the show. It was we're going to try to start as close to on time as possible. And, just seeing him backstage, he would, bouncing around with all that energy, rehearsing the cards, standing there waiting for changes. I remember being there in the control room the night Norm Macdonald was there with Courtney Thorne-Smith, and he did the famous chairman of the board riff. And it was like one of those things. I'm like, this is
that one. Yeah.
Yeah. It was one of those that was that year. And by then, Conan, the uncertainty had worn off, I think, for them. And they knew that they had something that was really cooking. It was good. People were starting to really, find it and like it and dig it. And so there was like a confidence that was developing there, and it was just really great to be a part of. It's so fun. And seeing those moments like with Norm, when you see the host of a show genuinely surprised by something that happens, it's just so great because you can see the difference in the reactions. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's almost like they break. It's like an actor who breaks in a scene.
Yeah.
Talk show mode is on, but suddenly talk show mode is off because and that moment in particular, for those who haven't, like, we've talked about a lot about Norm Macdonald on this show. We talked about it with Steve O'Donnell and who've worked with him, and other folks who worked with Norm. He's got such a special place in our heart.
That's got to be one of my favorite moments of the final 6 weeks is the Norm coming back. It was just
that might be the best stand-up on a late night talk show set in history, as far as I'm concerned.
It was just it was the perfect, it was hilarious and touching. It was just one of those things I just felt like watching history, it was just so cool.
Yeah, I could not agree more.
Yeah.
For those who don't know the joke we're talking about, just Google, Conan, Norm Macdonald, chairman of the board.
Courtney Thorne-Smith, maybe if you need to. Yeah. It's one of those moments. It's just so funny. It was just so wild.
Did you cross paths with Norm over the years quite a bit? Because obviously there's a lot of cross-pollination there. His adoration of Dave, who's always on the show. Did you cross paths with some of these folks, or as a writer, did you get kind of isolated from those guys?
Norm, I would, before I was a writer, I started the show on the staff in 99, and I became a writer in 2004. So I started doing stuff in the talent department as a researcher, and then I was a writer's researcher for a number of years. And so I crossed paths with a lot of different people. I didn't really get, I didn't really interact a lot with Norm in my younger years. I was more dealing with like Eric Estrada, or like James Earl Jones was on the show doing a top 10 list for New Year's Eve. And I remember being in the dressing room downstairs, and he's just in a dress shirt and his underwear. And I had to bring him a cheese platter while he rehearsed the top 10. Like, I was dealing with like the comedy guests that would come on for the comedy segments. So it was like, Carrot Top is in a, we wanted him to be on for some Act 5 segment. I remember he got stuck in traffic, so I had to run down to 8th Avenue to run him down so he could be in the green room or something, so Dave could, and he was a good sport because Dave was just going to mock him for some nonsense, so yeah.
Well, I loved those spontaneous moments that, obviously they're well crafted and well scripted to look so spontaneous. Why is Carrot Top suddenly just randomly showing up? But you guys were so good at that. Hearing you talk about that, you went, so your first job there was in the research department. That's where you started?
So after my internship. Okay. I interned in 98. Lee Ellenberg was the register assistant who hired me as an intern. And so I got to know all those guys. I was on that floor with the Stangles and, Carter Bays and Craig Thomas.
You started on 14.
On 14, yeah, it was. I did that round robin interview process where you interview in all the departments.
Yep.
And luckily, I was able to intern for them. It was an awesome summer. I got to be on the show. Actually, they did a segment called Dave Hangs with the Interns.
Yeah.
And it was like one of those things where he brings me out for like 4 seconds, asks my name, and then kicks me off. They put a clock up. It was like a 5-second countdown, and I was like, this is bonkers. So I was so fired up to be there, and they really embraced me, and I was really thrilled to get to know all those guys. So then when I graduated, they had a job opening in research because Tommy had moved up to writer, and then his replacement came, and then his replacement was leaving.
Right.
And I got the job in research. So I did that for 6 months. I submitted a packet. It was a 5-page research packet on Ricky Schroeder. There was like 12 candidates for the job, and he had just taken over on NYPD Blue to be Sipowitz's partner. And so
we had
to
Rick.
Yeah,
Rick
exactly. So we had to do a research packet over the weekend and turn it in on Monday. Yeah. And you got to write jokes and questions and stuff like that. And so I submitted that, and luckily I got that job. And I did it for 6 months. And then the writer's researcher job opened, and I was able to jump up there because one of the people who I worked with a lot as an intern was Jill Lederman,
Yep.
who was the writer segment producer, who went on to be the EP of Jimmy Kimmel Live, who's awesome.
Absolutely.
And I basically learned, everything I know about producing comedy and how to treat talent and how to, execute these segments from her. And it was awesome. And so as the writer's researcher, she was basically the one who said, come up, work with me. And that was sort of the partnership we had for a number of years going forward. And it was awesome because she's just the best.
We've heard that a lot from a lot of different people, both with the camera on and off. Jill is somebody who I would love to pick the brain of here. So you research was rapidly changing for you at that time with the rise of the internet. Like, I mean, we talked about this with a few folks. Callison, I think, is the first one we talked to him about. And it's like, researcher back in the day was a very different gig than researcher now.
I remember I was with Dave Puner and Josh Weintraub in research, and we were looking at some of the old research memos that used to come out, and they were maybe 1 page, 2 pages. And by the time we were there, sometimes they'd be up to 10, 12 pages if a guest hadn't been on in a long time. And so you'd still send interns over to the broadcast center to get the most recent magazines, but you were starting to use the internet more. You're really scouring the papers and stuff like that. And then as I moved up to 14, it became a little bit easier to figure out how to execute certain things. Like, for example, I used to have to help figure out what towns we were going to for Biff Henderson's America. And the internet was like such an instrumental component of figuring out, well, what's a small town we can go to in the middle of nowhere that still has some businesses. And finally, like, you could use, Yahoo's, or whatever it was at the time, AOL, I don't know what we were using.
Let's look at MapQuest now.
And you could sort of click on, and it was like nearby restaurants. And you could say, okay, this town has 480 people and there's a restaurant 2 miles away. So it gives you ideas of what you can do in those towns when you're going to go do those segments.
I'm fascinated to hear where every staff member came from, especially the ones who promoted from within. I love the pants culture of promoting from within, and so many people, like, going from a talent researcher, writing research, full-fledged writer. Guys like Ellenberg and some of these other people, knew they wanted to be comedy writers. At what point did you know you wanted to be a comedy writer? Is this beforehand, or is this you being swept up in the culture of everything and realizing, no, I can go and do this?
It was a combination of things. It was learning that you can, seeing up close and personal what it was like to be a writer. So, at Conan and at Letterman, seeing that environment. And I remember I was at Conan and I was making copies because I was a script intern.
Yep. And
I went to the copier and there was some papers on the copier before, as I was making the copies, I found there were some papers that were there already. So I took them off the copier and I looked, and it was like a list of everyone on the staff. And it was a breakdown of salaries. And I realized, wait a second, you can make money doing this. Do you know what I mean? Like, I didn't understand the economics of it. You know what I'm saying? I was like, wait a second, so you can afford to live in New York City and do this. It was one of those things. It was just like, I'm a 20-year-old kid and I'm like, oh, this is all starting to fall into place. You can actually earn a living doing something you love, being funny, writing jokes.
Yep.
And that was the sort of the moment I sort of figured it out. But then it was always important to me too. You can't be so aggressive. You can want to write, but like, it was really important for me when I was doing these jobs like researcher, writer's researcher, whatever, to do the work first.
Yeah.
Be good at the work, and don't make the writing the priority. That opportunity, that time will come. Do you know what I mean? Someone will say to you, hey, do you want to submit something here? Go ahead. Don't be so aggressive. Try to pick and choose your spots. You know what I mean? So make sure you do the work of the day, book the voiceover person, find the footage that the writer needs for their piece.
Right.
Get everything taken care of. And then when someone says, hey, if you have some downtime, you want to write top tens, go for it. And that was one of the things the Stangles were really great about. Justin and Eric Stangl, they basically said, eventually it was, by all means, when you have finished your work, you can submit some stuff, submit top tens, whatever.
Yeah.
And it was great.
That's really cool. I want to have them on. And actually, I haven't met either of them yet. I would love to have them on conceptually. I'd love to have them both on at the same time. I think that would be kind of fun.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
If they, play back and forth and all that kind of stuff. I think that'd be a kind of a unique episode.
I'm sure they'd be game for sure.
we've bounced around a little bit. I got to ask this. So you're an intern. I want to know what your jobs were like when you were an intern, the things that you would
Sure.
do. But I mean, you threw a big, beautiful pitch right across the plate there. Was that the very first time you met Dave on camera?
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's the first time you met David Letterman.
For sure.
You're doing a segment.
And
I remember.
Yeah, I remember Rodney Rothman was the head writer at the time, and he pulled me in
Yep.
the office, and he's like, "We want to do this thing." So Dave hangs with the interns, and I remember it was like queued up and ready to go, and I was in the wings for like maybe 2 or 3 days. And Jill was great, and she was coaching me, but it got cut and it kept getting bumped. And I was like, "Oh," and then I started to realize, like, "Oh, this is one of those things. There's a lot of things ready to go that aren't ever going to see the light of day, just for time or whatever."
Pre-tapes that are sitting there that may or may not get used.
Yeah, or even live elements. You'd even book actors and have a whole piece ready to go, and something will happen that'll spur Dave's curiosity, and it'll just take the show in a different way, and it'll bump to the next day or whatever. But then on the third day, I came out, and that was it. He just said, "Nice to meet you. Where are you from?" And I think I said my name, and I said I was from Erie, Pennsylvania. And he goes, and the clock expired, and he kicked me off the stage. It was really funny.
So, okay, how, like, did your mind melt? Like, okay, what a surreal way to meet David Letterman. You've been worshiping him for all these years, whatever, and then working for him. But working for him does not guarantee you're ever going to ever even be in the same room with the guy. And then suddenly you're doing a segment that's going to be on TV. Like, are you calling home and saying, "Hey, everybody in Pennsylvania, guess what? Your boy's going to be on TV tonight"?
Yeah, you're making a lot of calls. It's just one of those things. You want to actually. So the other thing you have to worry about is, even if you get on the show during the taping,
right,
you have to make sure you make it to the air version.
Yes.
Right. So it's one of those things. You're always calling and you're always hedging. It's like, hey, this could happen. You know what I mean? If it doesn't, it's okay.
Yeah,
but there's a chance it could happen. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. It definitely was mind blowing, and just being backstage with the music, and it's freezing cold.
Yep.
And the audio, but then once you're out there, you just sort of laser focus in on and I didn't have much to do, so it wasn't like I just had to walk out there and sit and not pass out. So, but it was fun.
So I mean, again, so many of these, we just had Lee on, and I mean, he was Page for 5-6 years, right?
Yeah.
So you ask him, how many episodes did you see? And it's like countless episodes that he saw, all these magic moments where he was actually in the room as a staffer.
Yeah.
But then you've got the exact opposite as well. Folks who show up on 14 and they don't even necessarily go into the theater very often. Right. Did you see a lot of either as an intern or in the early years as a researcher, did you see any of the stuff that was making it on air? Did you watch the show while you were working there? Like it's just such an interesting that's such an interesting thing to me, the situation.
There was a lot of opportunities to do that. There were like when you're working in the research department, you're one of the people that often get pulled for comedy segments to be extras in the background.
Yeah.
So Jill would call down and be like, "If you're not working on your packet at the moment, can you come down to the stage and just be in the background of this, quick pickup we're shooting, or this, quick little sketch we're shooting?"
Right.
So a lot of times you get to go down and be a part of it in that way, and then you get to watch it on the show later. Right. I got to be a far more involved, when I became the writer's researcher. So after the morning stuff that I was doing, which was like, booking voiceover artists, it was helping to find footage for comedy segments. It was, a whole bunch of other different tasks. We would do things before the show. Like, for example, Jill and I would go downstairs to help find audience members for Know Your Current Events, or Stump the Band. We'd go out and interview people, or, like sometimes I'd have to walk Calvert DeForest around when he came back on the show for a while. And so he would, for I think maybe 6 months, maybe a year, he would come out during the monologue and just interrupt it like every night.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I was like his sort of, wrangler. He would go out into that alleyway, and I'd make sure he got to, to where he had to go. Like before the show, I remember there's one story I've told a couple of times, but before the show, Calvert had to go to the restroom, and this was in the year 2000. So it was the guests that night were Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and Al Gore, I think, because it was election season.
Wow.
So it was a weird night there because Secret Service is all over the place. There's bomb sniffing dogs. There's, this iconic band rehearsing, and Calvert. He has to go to the bathroom, which is right across from the sound effects booth under the stage.
Yep.
So I take him from the alley under the stage to the bathroom. I'm waiting outside the door. I think I'm making small talk with like Gary Caffell, who's the sound effects guy who did all the glass crash sounds and everything.
Yep.
Next thing I know, 4 Secret Service agents come down the hallway and sort of push me aside. And then I see Al Gore, who goes right into the bathroom while Calvert's in the bathroom. And all I hear is Calvert scream. And I just see Al Gore walk back out. And I'm just standing there like, what just happened? Like, Calvert, I guess, didn't lock the door, and someone told Al Gore the bathroom's right across from sound effects. So it was, I saw there's just some insane stuff, like one night, I think you talked to Steve Young, right? You said?
Oh, a couple of times. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Love Steve.
Steve, like the writers sometimes are my best friends, and sometimes they created massive headaches, like he pitched, we do a Civil War reenactment on 53rd Street. Right. With 2, you have 2 different sides. You have, different guns. There was they were going to fire a cannon. Right. And so it was Jill found the people, and it was one of those things I had to help wrangle them all that day.
Yeah.
And Jack Hanna was on the show that night, he brought a water buffalo, but the water buffalo couldn't be near the cannon. So we had to move the water buffalo around the corner. And then in rehearsal, we didn't shoot the big cannon because they didn't want to waste the, ammunition or whatever.
Sure.
And, but then the actors who were, they didn't want to pretend to die because they were on TV and they wanted to be on TV as much as possible. But the whole point of a Civil War reenactment is some people have to get shot, and and it was just insane. And then we did it on the show. From the
mind of Steve Young. Let's make
from the mind of Steve Young. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was Steve Young. And then I remember during the show, just everyone is shooting their rifles or muskets or whatever, and then the cannon goes off, and it's just insane, and it reverberates throughout the entire neighborhood. And then it got so smoky with this. It was just, I saw a lot of crazy stuff.
And again, I love talking to the folks who help put this stuff together. I mean, you and I could do an entire show just on the writing stuff. We haven't even gotten to the writing stuff, but this is the stuff. Like Lee and I were talking about him as a Page, and I know that we could do an entire episode of him as a Page. Yeah, you guys, the logistics of putting all these things together. I watched recently. They recapped. Remember the cannon that was supposed to shoot a pumpkin across the Hudson to New Jersey? Just the logistics of that, and I love when things, real time came into the show when it came to the logistics of things. That cannon, or the night where they talked about playing the Eagles. I love that episode so much.
Well, with the cannon, were you talking about the cannon and how it got pushed to the second show and it got dark?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. And you couldn't see it, and then it became how much of this cost? Okay, yeah, okay, good, yeah. That was just, it was crazy, yeah.
And to me, like, I love that our, and I say our because we're both Gen Xers, our Tonight Show was that, as opposed to my dad's Tonight Show, which was Johnny and all the glitz and glamour and all that. I love that was our Tonight Show. Like, and you were part of the logistics of some of these things. That to me is just. Do you have any other? Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. What was your question?
No, I was going to say, do you have any other like logistics stories like that Civil War reenactment, that kind of stuff there? Like, do you have any other stories like that before,
we like, for example, for me, I did a lot of traveling, right? So I would go and help be like sort of the field producer for like Biff Henderson's America segments, right?
Yeah.
So like I would go, it would be like a director who would go, and it would either be Randy Grossack or Jessica Santini, and a writer would go, and Biff would go. But I was just learning on the job at the time. So, for example, you see Biff driving that Winnebago all the time, but that's only when the camera's rolling. When the camera's not rolling, Jeremy's driving the Winnebago, right? So, when we were the first time I ever did it, I think it was like Calhoun, Missouri, and I was driving the Winnebago. Or actually, I think it was the first time I was driving this very big Winnebago. I backed it right into a ditch, like within 10 minutes of driving it. You know what I mean? It was ridiculous.
Okay, hold on. Let's go back. Just let's pick that for a second.
Yeah.
You're in your early 20s.
Yeah.
And it's okay, yeah, you're flying out here. Here's your plane tickets, that kind of thing. Oh, you land. Okay, kid, you know how to drive a Winnebago? No, you're about to, like, and then you jump behind the wheel of a Winnebago. Is that it?
Yeah. And then you're driving and you're responsible for getting the whole crew in the Winnebago to the location. So here's another example. We did a Biff Henderson's America I was thinking about this the other day. It was in Whiting, Maine, right? And I was talking, it was Chris Harris was the writer, and they wanted to do a joke. It was, the joke was Biff is going to go on a lobster vessel. He's going to go on a lobster boat. He's going to pull up a lobster trap, and in the trap is going to be an AOL CD because those were everywhere at the time. Okay. And then the joke was going to be, oh God, these things are everywhere, right? Yep. So this is my first time doing this sort of thing. So I'm like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call a authentic lobsterman. I'm going to set this up. We're going to go out with a lobster vessel. We're going to put the CD in the thing, and we're going to shoot the joke, right? Yep. So I call the guy. He goes, awesome. We'll take you out on the boat. You have to meet us at 3:30 in the morning, and we'll be back by sundown because they're going to go out lobster fishing all day. And that was the first time I realized, I realized, wait a second. I got to think this through. I got to figure out, what does it mean to produce this joke? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so, I stopped down, thought about it for a second. I called a lobster restaurant in the nearby town. And I just said to the guy, you don't happen to have a boat that could take us? He's like, of course. So within 20 minutes, we were on the guy's boat in the harbor. He put the CD in a trap and dropped it. So it wasn't as organic and natural. Do you know what I mean? But it was one of those things I was learning to produce the comedy on the fly and saving us 12 hours on a boat for one joke. Do you know what I mean? Absolutely. So you're just sort of learning as you go a lot of times, and that happened we did a live show in Bosnia for the USO. And so I got to fly over to Bosnia with Biff, and we did a top 10 with soldiers. And so, I've been to Europe a couple of times, and both of them with the show. Once was to a military base in Germany, and once was to Bosnia, which was wild. So
you went to Ramstein?
Yeah, we did a top 10 with some troops there, which was really cool. Wow. And then we did the show. It was a Christmas show, I think, with the USO, and it was like Ernie Banks was there, Al Franken was there, the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, Biff was there, and so we did a whole taping of the show. It was pretty fun. That's
spectacular. Did you go to any sporting events with Biff as well?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I did, Super Bowls. We did World Series. And then as things transitioned, as I was a writer, so once I became a writer, I became the writer on the pieces. Yep. But before I became a writer, so up to 2004, I would be sort of the field producer on those pieces.
Yep. A field producer for David Letterman. That's a badge right there. Like, you think about, I don't know if there's any, Steve Allen did Man on the Street and all that kind of stuff, but David Letterman's remotes, what they were and what they were, the standard of them all the way to the end, phenomenal. Yeah. Can you, is it weird now looking back going, I can't believe I was one of the guys that helped create those moments?
Yeah, it feels weird. It's all a blur. A lot of it's a blur, but then there's some moments that really stand out. And then, obviously getting to work with everybody at the show was such a great experience. And I have so many, really positive memories. I spent, the formative years of my professional life there. So it was really, positive and such a great, looking back, it's really cool. And sometimes I try to, talk to my kids about it now and just sort of, share some anecdotes, and it just feels like a different life sometimes.
How old are your kids?
My oldest is a senior in high school, and my youngest is a sophomore in high school. So we've been spending a good amount of time traveling this last year, sort of checking places out and getting ready for that whole process next year. So it's gonna be fun.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Back to the producing those moments, things. Was there anything that you guys ever did that got cut that you were like, oh, I wish they would have aired that? That was a really cool package, because you alluded to it earlier, and we've heard legends of some of these comedy pieces that just never made the show for whatever reason. Anything that you can remember off the top of your head?
I'm trying to remember pieces that got cut. I remember Tom Ruprecht had The Late Show, the movie, that we ended up shooting a ton of awesome pieces for that never aired. I know there's off the top of my head, I can't think of anything, but I know there's so many. So I'll have to save that for another time.
Okay, well, and
or if one comes
great.
to mind as we're talking, I'll definitely jump in with it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that too, and
Yeah.
I mean, this is something that I don't know what I don't know that I'm quite a mosquito, but I'm probably a bit of a housefly in my annoyance level to Walter Kim, and this is the kind of stuff that I mean, as the box kind of slowly opens back up again, and it's so beautiful to see all this official stuff happening.
Yeah.
These are the archives that it would be really fun to open some of those archives, stuff that that was never aired and things. So it's good that we're talking about this. I just find this stuff endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, for sure.
So okay, you become actually no, first, I mean, obviously the first thing you got on the air was your 5 seconds with Dave. But do you remember your very first whether it was something that you just submitted or what, as a writer, do you remember the first thing that you got on TV?
Oh, that I got on TV. Wow. I'm sure it's a top 10 joke, but I might have
an answer to that question.
I have a box up in the attic that has all kinds of stuff in it that I should bring it down at some point and we'll go through it.
Yep.
But I remember things I have in there. I remember I have we did a top 10 list with astronauts in space, and it was they threw pencils at the camera in space, and so you saw the Late Show pencil floating through the air. And I remember afterwards the astronaut sent me a note saying, thanks so much for coordinating this. And it had two of the pencils that were in outer space. So somewhere up in the attic, there's like a Late Show pencil in like a little case that has like space dust on it.
That's been to space and back.
So yeah, there's some, and I'm sure I have other weird things too.
Right there. Are you the dude that coordinates that? Okay, yeah, it's going to go up in the shuttle. Let's get these guys some pencils. Let's make sure we FedEx it to them.
Yeah, see, that was the thing. Guy? Like, so when I was working with Jill she was A-list elite. She would handle all of this, the big celebrities, and I would handle sort of more, transport logistics.
Yeah.
Other people. Like I was the guy who had to, we had a sumo wrestler on once, and I had to help wrap him in his little, underwear thing. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So, or is this anything? That was the thing I had to deal with for many years of, looking at acts and booking them and bringing them in and rehearsing with those guys. So, yeah.
So she would have sent the pencils to the astronauts that went up there. Cause I mean, it's not like you just get Late Show pencils anywhere. You guys would have had to coordinate.
I remember having many conversations with an awesome guy. His name was Bill Wallish from Colorado. And he really was instrumental in getting it done. I might've sent the pencils, but then that might've been something that was props or scenic had to handle just through the chain of command. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was one of those things I would sort of put in the request, but I wouldn't have to necessarily ship it or whatever,
These are the types of things as well on the show that we want to talk about too. Okay, this is a coffee mug, unless it was from this and this place, unless it was like a weekend Late Show coffee mug, then it was a prop. And then they all had different rules, and there were different different departments did different things, and you did not encroach on those things, yet at the same time you had this entire Worldwide Pants family where it didn't matter if it was Pat Farmer or who, the guy who owned the deli around that, Rupert, it's such a it's so unique. That was
another part of the learning curve, is just figuring out what's the right order, who do you ask for what, and how do you approach it the right way. And the thing is, my goal was just to sort of be as respectful as possible and try to learn everything and do it by the book. And that way, no one felt like you're stepping on their toes or you were going, staying, you're out of your lane. So I was just doing my best to stay in my lane, do the best job I could. And then when I could help more, for example, when we were on these remotes, it was just a real skeleton crew. Yep. So it was a lot of I would have props in my backpack, or, we would do different things. Or with Biff, we would have little cue cards for him or something like that every once in a while, or stuff like that. So it changed a little bit in those situations.
I imagine in those situations as well, it would be a lot of get in, get out. You didn't get a chance to see a lot of the places that you were, you got to business and then you went back because of the breakneck speed of the production, I would assume, right? Or were there times
that was
where
kind of how it is.
Say, oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, there was one instance. Yeah, it was usually get in, get out, because you just had to get back to work. There was one time when I was going down with Biff. We were going to do a live shoot in Miami on the beach, in Miami Beach, and Biff was going to have a metal detector. And during the show, he was just going to look for stuff with a metal detector, which I thought Great, this will be perfect. Biff and I get to go out to Miami Beach. I remember we got there, we had dinner, we were at an outdoor restaurant, and Mel Brooks was like 2 tables over. And I just remember like being really nervous. And I remember Biff and Mel having like a little exchange, and it was just like the coolest thing to be witnessing it. And we were supposed to fly right back. But Dave got shingles. And the bit got canceled. So then Biff and I ended up having to stay like an extra day because we weren't sure what was going to happen.
Right.
And we didn't have any extra clothes. So I remember it was like me and Biff in Miami going to like the Gap to buy, another shirt to wear. I don't know. It was just, things like that. That was like the only time we got an extra day to hang out, really, because it was usually after you shoot like a Super Bowl or whatever, you're coming right back. Or in a lot of cases, towards the end, you'd feed the footage back. So like the AD or the director who was there would facilitate getting the footage fed back, and you'd fly back, but you probably wouldn't arrive in time to edit it. It would already be being edited. So for example, like if I shot a Super Bowl, generally it was like Lee who would be editing it. And so by the time I got back, I could sort of chime in with any other things I remembered to look for in the footage that we could incorporate in the piece. But it was pretty much a team effort at that point,
I loved hearing that too. I love every time I hear about the writers working together and collaborating, rather than, because I mean, you hear these stories about these writer rooms, Saturday Night Live being the famous example, of course, being Shark Tanks and, us versus them. And it just seems like, for the most part, I mean, notable exceptions, of course, but it seems like the Pants crew were really a crew that gelled together and collaborated more than anything. And it certainly must have helped in the in shaping you and your skill as a copywriter.
Oh, for sure. Because I feel like, I have a certain sort of style in a, way, that I think sort of may have helped fill in gaps for other people. I mean, there are people, who we work, Steve and Lee and Joe and Tommy. I mean, these were guys that were, just awesome. And, and the Stangles were so great. And it was, I just tried to find my niche, contribute as best I could, and then, everybody got a chance to step up at times and sort of take the lead. And you're doing so many shows, you're doing 200 shows a year.
Yep.
Everyone just, it's like, we got to buckle down and work together because we're just trying to put on the best show we can, given the, limited amount of time we have to produce them,
Fantastic.
Or even just seeing Jerry Mulligan, just being near Jerry, it was one of those things you're just like, oh, this is like, we would be in the room, the writer's room having a meeting, and sometimes Jerry would be going down to rehearsal because he was going to be on the show that night, and he would just walk in and he'd just yell like, I don't know, something about the movies, and then he'd walk out, and it would just, everyone would laugh, and it would just be, one of those moments you're just like, that's Jerry Mulligan, you know what I mean? And you're just, it was just so cool to sort of be around all these people all the time.
14
I feel
was
very grateful,
and that's the other part too, is how many, like, this culture of the Pantsers, very few of you can take a compliment without deflecting it, ninja like, subtly just, reposition the compliment and then make it about somebody else or something like that. That one, and then grateful, like, you're all just humbly grateful. Were there times where there was imposter syndrome there where you're like, I shouldn't be here? Or did you just grow so organically because you did come from a different department and were just growing within this company that was shielded? I
mean, I feel to some degree, I feel like I had, being at the show and working there for a few years before becoming a writer, I felt like I was really able to sort of capture the voice and understand the show. But absolutely, like when when I had the opportunity to be a writer, it was, you spend the first, every 13-week cycle, you're like, I mean, this could be it, maybe, I don't know, you're just sort of trying to find your footing. And eventually you have to put that aside and you have to say, we've been here long enough, you've shown you could do the work. So now try to relax and try to figure out, how to not worry about just getting something on, but how to get something on that's meaningful and different and helps, evolve the form and the things we always do.
Yes.
Can you try to create something? So you're trying to not just fit into the template that exists already, but try to push through and find new things to do or new, and it's really hard, but you're just trying to push yourself so that you have to forget about the imposter syndrome angle and realize you're here for a reason. You've proven you can do it. Yep. 13 weeks has come and gone and you're still here and people are still, seem to generally like you being around. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
okay. So I'm going to ask you one question, then I'm going to ask you a question about the 13-week cycle to let your brain think about the question I'm going to ask.
Sure.
A moment like what you're describing where you're not, and I want to be very, very, very careful as I say this, you're not merely helping, with something that has been around, like Stump the Band. I mean, or something that has been around, but you're wanting to create one of these moments that's new, that does move the rock a little bit, or is one of those magical little things. Okay, just create magic out of nothing, right? Like that's a tough order. The question is, were there any of those moments in your mind that you were a part of, that you saw, that you helped create and did? So that's the question there. Like, what's an example of one of those moments? Now I'm going to ask you this so you can think about that in your subconscious. The 13-week cycle, you go from being, working with Jill, in this job, obviously, salary bumps and all that aside, but you're working with her in this job, this stable job that is a lot of fun, where you're doing a lot of cool stuff, stuff that the kid in you is just, I can't believe this kind of a thing. If I'm correct on that, I don't want to overstep,
for sure.
But
no, you're right.
Doing a lot of great stuff, making the jump over to 13-week cycle of the life of a writer. Was that difficult? Was there trepidation there?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. But it's, you have to have that belief in yourself that, and I had the opportunity to be writing a little bit beforehand. So I had the opportunity to get it. So that's why it's a little confusing, because I'd gotten some jokes on the show before becoming a writer. So I'm sure there's the first joke I had as officially as a writer, but, I felt like I understood the job. I felt like I wasn't where I needed to be yet, but the people around me were so supportive. Obviously, Lee, there was no bigger supporter, of me than Lee. And he was such a great sort of mentor and sort of guide through the process, and seeing how he transitioned to that role. And then obviously when Joe came in, and being able to watch Joe and how smart and funny and just his unique style and ability. So all these things, you're just like seeing all these different people, and you're trying to like will various aspects from them to sort of become part of, sort of how you operate. So you can, just push forward. I don't know. I don't really think, it's hard. Like Tom Ruprecht always said, it's impossible for when someone says, write a hit single. You can't, it's really hard. So for me, it was little small victories, figuring out a new thing to do, like, I don't know, Lee and I at one point, we, pitched something that was like called the Technical Maintenance Minute. And it was just a way to feature different members of the show in the technical maintenance department. And the technical maintenance guys would come out and talk about some new piece of technology they had in some very, tech speak, gobbledygook. And it was just one of those things. It was fun to find new people on the show to feature, just to sort of mix things up and give you a new thing to try to write for.
Did you how many in front of the camera experiences did you have in your run?
I'm trying to think. There was a few, when I was the writer's researcher, because I was around, I got to sort of be in a couple of shots. I had a couple of lines. I pretended to be a page once, but and opened the door, and it was like a swarm of bees outside. And I don't know, it was something like that. I remember too, I think one of the guest host shows when Dave was out for the heart surgery. I think Dana Carvey was hosting, and there was I'm trying to think, I was in the audience. I was like an audience plant that night. So there were some moments. I have them written down somewhere,
Okay.
But there was a few. There was nothing. There was nothing really, remember when Jeremy was on the show or whatever. So
right. That question was setting up this one here. Some of the writers, performers already, I think about Bill Sheft and some of these other people, some of the, natural performers, some of the writers, Joe pushed into it,
right. Yeah.
As potentially, let's mess with Joe from the other writers, that kind of a thing. Did you ever did you get bit by the performing bug at all through your time working there?
I was very comfortable sort of in my role, and I enjoyed being the person who would, occasionally give the push to people that were uncomfortable. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, I enjoyed, performing for the writers, and just sort of being in the room and sort of letting that be where I sort of did my thing,
Yeah.
I didn't really have an itch for that. I enjoyed sort of being behind the scenes, and doing what I had to do.
Yeah, I gotcha. Have you thought about one of those moments? Was one of those moments where it's like, yep, we moved the needle a little bit. This was more than just getting something on the air. This was something that I'm proud of. That was, to me anyway, really important.
I don't, when you're talking about that, I don't remember. I remember when the whole Leno Conan thing was happening. And I just remember, and not so much me individually, but I remember as a group, it being one of those moments where you were like, we really need to, try to tackle this in the best way we can. And I just remember feeling sort of overwhelmed by that whole situation. But I remember, everyone was coming to play, like Lee and Joe and Tommy and Steve. Like, I just remember, and the Stangles were back there, and it was just a lot of like, we got to figure out how to do this. And it was just one of those moments where it wasn't individually me moving the needle in any way, but it was figuring out how Dave was going to address this situation, which was so linked to his own previous situation. That's where I felt like, wow, just being in the room here for this and contributing whatever I can felt like an interesting sort of tipping point there, just in terms of, we are the ones who have a very specific need to say something here, and that was one of those moments where it was like, wow, this is crazy.
Yes.
I think Joe had that Leno victims unit, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Was that what? So yeah, there was like,
Ed Hall came back for that.
Yes.
I just, so for me, so the last 6 weeks of, plug for Scott Ryan's book. I mean, I love, Zinnemann and Carter's books. I mean, I love them. They're fantastic. But this book here, to me, it's my favorite 6 weeks in any television run of any broadcasting show. In his, like, the last 6 weeks of this show, to me was everything. If there was a quote unquote golden age of TV, that would be it. But if I had a favorite time of David Letterman's entire run, and I had to kind of pin it down to one moment, it was either Late Shift 1 or Late Shift 2. And they both asked me on different days, right? Like,
right.
What you got to be a part of, those moments, I'm fascinated by them. I'll watch Don Giller's compilations on every moment kind of that happened there, all the shots being fired back. And I think there's even one where it showed, some of the stuff Kimmel did and some of the stuff that everyone else was doing. Like, would you guys, for example, when Kimmel goes on and does his entire show as Leno, you guys as writers, you're in a room together, you're seeing all this stuff that's happening, Conan releases his letter, that kind of thing. Is that all you guys are talking about those days? And it's like, this is what the show's going to be for the next, for right now anyway, we're going to be talking about this and doing this. Like, it must have been an amazing perspective to see everything else going on around you.
Yeah. It's surreal. And you're you're just trying to find your way through it. And there's a lot of, writing things that never see the light of day. And it's a lot of, we can't push this far. We have to pull back, we can't quite say it this pointedly. Let's figure out a way to say it that gets the message across, but is a little less harsh. You're trying to realize, because it's, everyone has feelings in this whole process too. So
absolutely. Well, And I think you guys did a really good job of just making fun of everything going on around. Like, I think you guys did a really, really good job of that, making fun of everybody, and not, obviously Leno was the focal point, but at the same time, I think you guys did a really good job of just making fun of the situation. And of course, bringing it back to Dave and Dave's situation, I'm still, I've been rejected for the Tonight Show again, that attitude. Did Dave ever surprise you guys Because I mean, apparently there were nights, and I don't know if it was just him feigning it, but apparently there were nights where he's like, "Hey, I'm not going to talk about this," and there was a blue card with a comedy piece sitting right there, and he ended up just talking about it anyway.
You'd see it and you'd be like,
yeah,
what are you doing? Come on, let's go. Come on. Like you'd be confused, and you're just like, wait a second. And then you'd realize, this has a very specific window of time. You have to put it on the air, and it just, and at the end of the day, it's just like, it's his show. His name is on the marquee. It is what it is. And you just sort of roll with it,
Yeah, so. I think there was one night too where he even said, "Oh, do we still have time for this?" And Barbara just screams, "No!" Like exasperated Barbara. No,
exactly.
Oh, okay, shrug. We'll be right back, kind of a thing. I can imagine that those would be electric moments when things like that would happen. I don't know if it came with frustration for the writers at that point, or if you were like, this is kind of cool. The spontaneity.
It was only frustrating, if it was like, you were there really late working on like a video quiz or something, and you had, it took forever to figure out what the jokes would be, and and then the graphics department, because was working on it all day, and so it was really. I don't know. I wish I had specific moments, like specific things that got cut. I should have kept a more detailed list of those, just because it would be fun to sort of go back and go through it. And
Oh, and that will happen as this show develops. That's going to happen. I can't wait to have a couple of you on at the same time, and then just sit back and eat the popcorn while you guys just kind of, bring these things up. And I'm so glad that it's happening. I don't know if you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's great. I think it's really cool that people are, you've put this together here. It's such a unique, it's fun to see people's perspectives, and because it's been a while now, but as we've been talking about it, memories have been come flooding back, so it's really cool.
That's good, and that's thank you for saying that. That's fantastic that's happening. The enthusiasm that I bring to this, the genesis of that enthusiasm, I've talked about it before on the show a little bit. My my daughter-in-law, she's sweet little blonde 22-year-old, I want to show you something. She knows I love comedy and all that. I want to show you something. Shows me something that someone did, and I just kind of no, I'm going to show you where that originated, and then I bring up the Letterman clip of it, and
right.
I'm astounded, and you might be able to kind of identify with this because our age is similar. I'm astounded how quickly the world has forgotten Johnny Carson, and Johnny Carson was the biggest star of the world,
right?
And to me, it's like, I don't know what it is, Jeremy. I swear to God, it's just this weird little itch where it's like, nope, we're going to transfer some knowledge here, and we're going to show. We're gonna show future generations and the generations now about the innovative stuff that you guys did. It's so amazing watching Walter and company put these moments up on YouTube now, because you never had the opportunity to have the YouTube moment the next day and the viral moment. You had the water cooler moment, which is why your numbers, and before the dilution of TV and all that kind of crap, we can talk all sorts of that. But you never had the opportunity to go viral. And there were thousands of moments on that show that would have gone viral.
Sure.
And so to me, us doing stuff like this and collaborating with the, getting the old band back together and talking about this stuff, it adds a richness to it. And I'm really stoked about what we're all doing here. This is a lot of fun.
And it's cool. And it's only going to grow. I mean, there's so many people that I'm sure your list is huge, but I'm excited to sort of see some familiar faces and hear their stories again.
Anybody, and I'm going to ask you this, anybody from any position within the Pants family of any sort, any intros are welcome. I'll take them. There isn't one person, you talk about the sound effects guy. Yeah, I want that guy. I've got I'm telling tales out of school a little bit here, but I'm about to record with David Kay. I am awesome. Fascinated to talk to him. You mentioned Janice. I would love to have Janice on it.
For sure.
Some of these things, everybody had a part in this very unique situation in broadcasting history. So let's go to the end. Let's talk about that last 6 weeks that I know we're jumping around here, and I like to do it differently.
I'm happy to jump however. Yeah, absolutely. However you want to do it.
Cool. Because you've already said that you'll come back on and we'll get the box out and we'll look through the box. So that'll be
I will bring the box out and we'll just go through. I won't even look at it.
Oh my God, that's
We'll just go through it. We'll go through it organically. It's fine.
Oh, Jeremy, you're making my night. The last 6 weeks, at the time of this broadcast, Brian Tetta's staff favorite moments just came out, and I loved watching the evolution of him and his career. Anybody who was an intern and evolved and then waited and made it to the end, I love that story so much. Let's go to the night that Dave announced his retirement. It's about 1.5 years, I guess, before you guys finished up. A little bit, maybe a little less than that. He tells the Eagle story and all of that, and announces it. Were you part of the meeting beforehand where everybody gathered and it was, hey, Dave's going to announce retirement tonight?
No.
Okay, so you saw it on air.
Yeah, I think I think maybe we had it trickled upstairs a little bit. I can't remember exactly, but I remember being with the other writers upstairs, probably, because it was almost showtime, so we were probably getting ready to have dinner or see what happened, or watch the show together, and we might have heard right before. But
typically
I just remember
showtime. You guys, that's what you're doing at showtime. The
so
writers are eating together, right, in a room.
Yeah. It depends on what time. What if we're taping 2 shows and one is much earlier, we wouldn't be. But you're basically waiting to make changes after Dave's seeing everything in the dressing room, and once those are locked, then you go and you sort of hang out together. Because sometimes they might throw out the whole top 10 list during the show, and you have to write a new one during a commercial break.
Tommy talked about that. That was those would be crazy moments.
Yeah, and or there'd even be moments too where this is a digression, but there'd be moments where you have to write a special top 10 list also for some random group that you know nothing about, and you're trying to write top 10 jokes for a special event that Dave's going to record during the show, and it's like for I don't know, some Elks Lodge in Montana that it's going to do a special top 10 list for, and it's just an interesting process, and then we try to stay together so we can all bang these jokes out together.
That's really cool. How often did that happen?
Not that often. It was every once in a while there'd be a special event or things like that would come up, and he was going to record a second top 10 during the show, and every once in a while it was really hard to write specific jokes for like a group or an organization that you don't know anything about. You know what I mean? It was just a challenge. So you do your best to just come up with, random non sequiturs or, odd puns with people's last names. And so there, like that was one of those things. Like Steve Young was always the best at coming up with, the random thing that seems so obvious, but it's so funny. Like one day we were, it was like a random middle of the week and we had nothing for a comedy segment, and he ended up just pitching a commercial about hump day, and it was just different questions about people and humps, and it was just one of those random funny things about, it was just a commercial for hump day because it was the middle of the week and we had nothing else to talk about and there's nothing topical, you know what I mean? Just people would come up with, and people could have come, the way he approached things from such a unique, skewed point of view was just awesome. And a lot of times, Lee and Steve and Joe, they could just come up with something so clever and unique that bailed us out of jams time and again.
Yeah. I gotta be, I love Steve Young. Like, I love his mind. Yeah. I love his perspective on life. I love, he is clearly one of the smartest, most skewed views askew. We'll get to that in a second. I want to talk about Kevin Smith. We got to talk about that.
Sure.
But Steve Young's mind is just so impressive to me. And there's so many things that he hits that just speak to me that I identify with, but I just could never, I look at that. I get intimidated when I talk to guys like that. He's got this unbelievable perspective on things that's so fresh and unique. I just appreciate him so much. Who were some of your mentors? Steve Young, obviously one of your mentors. Who are some of the other mentors on the show for you? Lee, you talked about him.
I mean, so when I was an intern, it was the Stangles were there. It was Carter and Craig. I'm trying to think. Chris Harris was there. I mean, these are guys I looked up to. There's so many great people. But like, Steve, Lee, Joe, Tommy were some of my contemporaries there, and it was just so fun to sort of be in the room with them. The Stangles gave me my shot, and they gave me the opportunity to write, and so that's one of those things where it's interesting how every step of the way there always seems to be like someone who's I benefit from someone looking out for me and sort of giving me that extra nudge to sort of get me to the next step. And it was such a great, those guys were really instrumental in sort of helping formulate my comedy, worldview. So
yeah.
It was very cool. But just, Jerry Mulligan and Bill Sheft. I mean, seeing, I didn't get to deal with those guys, as much because, Jerry
you were
by then.
passing the night, right? Jerry had just kind of retired as you were.
I mean, I got to work with Jerry as the writer's researcher a lot and just being there. But yeah, when he retired, it was, I regretted not being able to, be on the staff longer with him.
Oh,
but
he'll appreciate hearing that. What a sweetheart!
Yeah.
I can't wait to have him back on the show.
Yeah.
That was talking to him was an insane honor.
Yeah. And then as the new folks came in too, like after that core group, like RJ Freed and Paul Masella and those guys, it was Jill Goodwin was there too. Zach Smilovitz. I mean, there was a great, as we got to the end there, it was just fun to sort of see the next generation there too, ready to take the mantle and go.
Man, you're so good at the segue and bringing us back again to where we were going to talk. So the night that Dave retired, you were probably in the room, or said that he was going to retire. Pardon me. Yeah. You were in the room, and shock, all that. At that point, did you kind of in your mind hit the video record button a little bit more? Were you a little more present for that next year and a bit?
I think so. It was one of those things. I just always said to people, I couldn't. It just like I would have been 3 years old, so I couldn't have been there at the beginning.
Right.
But I absolutely want to now be there at the end. Do you know what I mean? And just to be there to sort of be a part of that final run to help shape in whatever small way I could. How things went. At the end, it was just I was just grateful to be a part of it, and it was one of those things you do try to be more present. You do try to say, oh, we really now have to figure out how to land the plane, and it was fascinating.
It really was. And I mean, right now at the time of this broadcast, it's around the holiday season, and we think about, we've already shot our Christmas episode.
Oh, nice.
And it has a beautiful focal point on the last Christmas episode for you guys. And I mean, Darlene, that last, I'm going to have Glenn Borders on here. And he's going to talk about the snow and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, great.
That last moment, like, were you in the writer's room when Darlene was singing Christmas, her famous Christmas song, or did you sneak down to the studio for any of those moments?
Trying to think. There was, we just ended up, I think I ended up just staying upstairs. It was one of those things too, because I don't know. I kind of wanted to sneak down, but at the same time, I don't know. I didn't want to get like too emotional or too, I don't know. I didn't want to just get, I just wanted to sort of, again, like it's one of those things, you stay in your lane. I didn't want to be somewhere where I didn't need to be and sort of be in the way. And I just sort of took it in from, upstairs, I think.
Well, and that's what you did formally, right? When you were the production assistant or the research assistant, get your job done well first, then do the extras and things, and that kind of, they're almost the same thing.
That's it. I think I maybe got one. I think I got 2 autographs in my entire time at the Letterman show. It was I had Tenacious D. They signed a CD for me, which was awesome. And it just because I don't know what I don't know what came over me. I tried to avoid doing that, And then so I was a Syracuse guy, and we had like Jim Boeheim on and Carmelo Anthony and Jerry McNamara after they won the national championship. So they signed a Sports Illustrated for me. So, but yeah, it was one of those things. Other than that, I kind of did my best to sort of, stay upstairs and mind my business.
Okay. That being said, there probably would have been times. I mean, I love talking to Lee and Joe, well, Lee in particular, but Alan Coulter's Celebrity Interview is a good example.
Yeah, sure.
Where you might end up as a writer working with some of these big stars and helping to create content for the show with them. Any moments there that anybody that you worked with that come to mind as I say that?
There was Maria Pope at one point had asked me to write something. It was like there was like a run of Steve Martin was going to be on the show, and he was going to be promoting his Friday appearance every night during the week leading up to it. And it was one of those things, I just had to write the scripts basically based on what they had come up with. But just even seeing that, being part of that process and seeing that up close was great. I mean, obviously working with Chris Elliott on pieces was just incredible. I mean, he's
awesome.
the best.
Yep.
I got to do a lot of work at the end. I did a lot of pieces with Andy Kindler.
Oh,
we did
wow,
a lot
that's
of,
awesome.
So
he's a dream guest for me as well.
You should definitely get Andy on the show. We shot maybe 25 remotes together all over. Went to space camp. We went to like the Unclaimed Baggage Center. We went to spring training. We went all over the place. And so he's a lot of fun. It was really fun working with him. It was. Part of the fun for me too was like working with like the voiceover actors that we would book to do the voiceovers, and there would be guys like Rob Webb and Ralph Gunderman and J.R. Horn, who played like the chief of police in like Die Hard 3, I think, and he was like, and like Sarah Krieger, and we had all these awesome people that I got to know in the business that weren't in front of the camera, but their voices you would absolutely know. Sam Freed was another one. You'd know their voices from any commercial you'd hear, and it was just so cool getting to know them. I just felt like it was overwhelming, sort of all the people you get to meet, and then you're starting to piece together where you've heard that voice or where you've seen that person before. And even commercial actors that would come on and just do little guest spots, or day players that would come in. It was really cool.
We had a great interview with Jody Ebert, the
fuck you guy, right?
Yeah.
Can you say that on the show? Can you what can you say on the show?
This show? Absolutely. Say whatever you want.
Okay.
I loved the perspective. Again, this is why I want to get Kindler on as well. Like the perspective of people who didn't work for the show but were on the show, and because everybody has a different perspective. The Steve Martin thing right there, I'm not going to let that go. Famously, there were people who, when they would come on the show, they took it very seriously, and weeks beforehand, sometimes they would be wanting to make sure that it was going to be really, really good. Bruce Willis is one. Steve Martin is another. That's so, and that I
know. Lee used to work with Steve all the time and was so integral in like a lot of the Steve and stuff. And it was always interesting to hear him sort of talk about that process. But Bruce was always coming on. He's like, it was always Bruce is going to do like 4 or 5 things. We're going to shoot these different things. There were certain celebrities too, like Tom Hanks, for example, would give he wouldn't necessarily record comedy bits, but he would give special care. Like when I was in research, you'd see how thoughtful he was preparing his segment, making sure that there was engaging, fun stories, and it helped Dave. It set Dave up for great jokes, and it was really interesting to sort of see that part of the process.
Okay, so this is just on the fly here, and I don't know if you'll remember this or not. You certainly would have been a writer when it happened. I can't pull the year out of my head, but one of the greatest Tom Hanks bits that I ever saw on that show, famously, of course, Dave's last late night, that Tom Hanks was phenomenal on that, talking about the stories about being a bellhop. But there was a bit that you guys wrote for the show where Dave looked at his desk and he's like, what? He's looking down at the desk and he's looking around, and there's a button on the desk that had never been there before. And he looked and he's like, I don't know what to do. And then he goes and he presses the button, and out runs Tom Hanks. He jumps into the chair beside him and he said, "Hey Dave, I'm here for you." It's like,
that's really funny.
And I don't know if you remember that or not.
I remember it. I don't remember when it was. I don't remember who wrote it, but I remember it. And I remember moments like that. There was a mandate at some points where it was like, we're trying to come up with these just little quick things. And then you find out you have Tom Hanks is available, but he can't do a full panel segment or whatever. And so it's the perfect thing.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Love that stuff. Loved, this was probably before your time when it came to your time on the show. Tony Randall would just randomly appear. Mandy Patinkin would just randomly appear. And again, you guys were so good at creating planned spontaneity. And it was just an amazing thing. Going up to the show's end, the last night, again, I don't know that there has ever been a more perfect final show, culminating with Barbara's unbelievable. I mean, it was the team, but Barbara led that amazing montage to live music, which,
it's great.
I want to do an episode just on that, because there's a lot of drama around how that that whole ordeal went.
Sure.
But I mean, just a beautiful piece of television there, culminating there. The last night, where were you during the last show? Were you in the writer's room? Were you in the theater? Were you already at the party?
No, I remember the last day, it was a lot of going around taking pictures with, my, by that time I'd worked with the editors so long. So I wanted to make sure I was down there. I saw, Mark Spada and Dan Baggio and Andrew Evangelista and and Jessica and Randy and everybody that was down there. We took pictures. I saw the graphics department, took pictures with all of them. And it was, so that the day was basically doing that. And then it was like down in the studio. And I remember taking a picture on the set with, I think I have one with like Rob Burnett and Jerry Foley, just people that, anyone that I could sort of take a picture with. We did that day. And then during the show, we were in the conference room. I remember, I think Carter and Craig came back and we all watched together on the TV in the conference room. And it was awesome. It was one of those like, can't believe this is happening moments,
Yeah.
And then I just remember I have vague memories of the after party and, standing across the street, just looking at the marquee for the last time. It was pretty wild.
Yeah. What did you okay, so what was the 21st like? Like, I mean, we hear the stories of the confusion of the, of course, of the set. So glad some of it got rescued and what was that like? Did you grab any souvenirs of any sort?
Not some. I mean, I probably have a couple of like, bumper cells upstairs somewhere.
Yeah.
I do have one thing framed in my office, and it's when I left as an intern, they gave a late night bumper and all the writers signed it. And so it's a super cool memento to have from my internship. But no, I didn't steal anything from the set. It was weird. Most things were packed up, but just sort of being around for a little bit and seeing, everything in the dumpsters was kind of, just, it made it seem very real, very quick. You're like, oh, maybe we can just come back and do a show on Monday, but no, it's that's it.
From this guy's perspective, traumatizing as well. I was there a month before. I was there. My show was on April 20th. That's when my little moment happened.
Yeah.
That moment.
It was April 20th.
April 20th.
Okay, cool.
Was my night. And so It was very fresh in my mind. Like, because we were down there, it was all about, and then like, getting our picture taken behind the desk and then having that moment with Dave in the audience. Like that was, to me, it was like, okay, my video recorder was on like crazy. So, going and meeting and seeing Rupert again and all that stuff, thinking, okay, this will be the last time I have anything to do with Letterman. Yeah. God, was I wrong. And so when I saw those dumpsters, in my head was literally like, okay, well, wait a second. This is happening right now. Is there a way tomorrow I could be there with a U-Haul beside those dumpsters to try? Like, I literally was, I could picture it all like right there in my mind's eye. It's like, oh no, this needs I don't get it. What the hell is happening here?
Yeah.
And this should be all in a museum.
So now now Chris Gethard, somehow it was part of this, right? He got rescued some of the set. Is that true?
I don't know all of the people who rescued. I don't, to be perfectly put all my cards on the table, I don't know who it was that rescued this one.
Yeah.
That's the Verrazano.
It looks awesome.
Your set.
Yeah.
Crazy that. Yeah. So grateful. I do know where 3 or 4 of the bridges are, and maybe after I hit stop, I can talk about who might have some of those.
Yeah, awesome.
So, but I mean,
I'm just glad they survived in some capacity, because it's such a cool,
For those who did do the dumpster diving, but there's so much that didn't survive, and I mean, to me, that's just a shame of shames. Now that being said, Thursday came, Friday came, Monday there wasn't another show. What was re-entry like? Because I mean, this is a huge part of your life, like you said, your formative years. What was it like when it ended, and where did you go? What have you done since?
It was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Monday after the show ended, Lee and I had a meeting in Brooklyn with the Gregory brothers. from YouTube. Do you know they do the Songify the News?
This is the is this the music
Shmo Yoho?
Yeah, so, there you go.
And yeah, they like the from TikTok, like the Corn Kid, that song.
Yeah.
We met with them, I think, the following Monday, and ended up doing a digital web series with them over the rest of the summer. That was the which song was our first thing back, and so it was called Song Voyage. And so that was it. Yes. And so it was basically they went to different countries and were going to make like their whole thing was making viral songs with different artists. And so they went to Vietnam and Japan. They did a song that's on there was one it was a guy who he was like a chicken farmer, and they have a song called Chicken Attack that it was just silly and weird and fun, and it was just cool to sort of get some entree into the digital space, because we had been sort of analog for so long, and then to move right into that was really fun. And then we bounced around doing a bunch of different things. So the nightly show, Tom Ruprecht invited me to write for the nightly show for a little bit, so we did that. It was important for me to try to do as many different things as possible, because I felt like I had done some time in late night, so I wanted to really explore different opportunities. So Lee and I worked in a pilot with Dan Harmon for the show called Great Minds, which was really fun. And then
with Dan Harmon, wow.
And then we did an awesome. It was a really fun experience. Ethan Berlin invited me to write for a game show called Paid Off with Michael Torpy, and it was a show where the contestants all had enormous student debt, and the whole goal was if you won the show, they paid off your debt.
Oh my God.
If you won the episode. So we shot 32 episodes. We shot them in 2 16-episode chunks in Atlanta. And it was really cool because I had started to notice this trend for jobs I was, meeting for. It was, a lot of advocacy in, different social aspects of not just comedy, but it was, it was something that had maybe a little more of an impact or
social enterprise
could make a difference in someone's life.
Yeah.
And so it was really unique to sort of it was like, the goal was to sort of make sort of a sort of modern day, a new version of remote control, but it had this sort of social angle to it. And, Michael Torpy is just one of the most talented guys, and getting to work with that show, it was just a lot of fun to sort of help be a part of something from the ground up and figure out what it's going to be. And it was really cool. And getting to shoot in Atlanta, it was my first experience getting down there to shoot. So it was really neat.
That's really
and in the meantime, just working on other things like, writing pilots and writing scripts. So it's been good.
And that's what are you doing right now?
So right now I just finished writing my first feature. So I'm waiting to sort of, take the next step with that. So
man.
So I'm just trying to figure out what's next with that, and just, playing around trying to figure out what's next.
A comedy, I assume.
Yeah, it's certainly my sensibility. It's a little comedy, a little horror, a little sci-fi. So it should be a lot of fun. So I'm hoping that it, turns into something special.
Congratulations on that. And
Thanks,
and
man.
of course, with the little teeny tiny voice that we have, we will be shouting your praises and excitement for you.
Thanks.
And when anything moves forward with it, we would love to talk to you about it and be a part of the hype machine, getting that going.
Sure, man.
Oh my
Thanks,
gosh, that's so
it.
good, Jeremy. That's
Thanks,
fantastic.
Thanks.
I got to finish because the other night we're going back and forth, and you're like, oh, I have to go. And immediately, you drop a bomb to me anyway. That's like, oh my God, that's what you're going to do. How did you get wrapped up into the world of Kevin Smith? And what did you do recently with him?
Well, after it was during the pandemic, my wife and I said we needed a change for the family. So we wanted to figure out, what we could do to sort of help everyone reset. So we moved from the town we were living in, we moved down to the Jersey Shore, to Highlands, New Jersey. And that's Kevin Smith's hometown.
Did you know this before? Have you been a Kevin Smith?
Yeah. I've been a fan since in college when I saw Clerks for the first time, and I've seen, everything. So I've been a fan. And then one of the things we did for the show actually was we shot Biff. We did a remote on the set of Cop Out in 2009, maybe. I think it came out in 2010.
Yeah, oh my God, I forgot about that.
It worked out because Tracy Morgan and Bruce Willis. And so because Bruce was doing it and they were shooting in New York, Biff went out for the afternoon. So we interviewed Bruce, Tracy, Kevin. And so that was a lot of fun. And because Kevin had done a bunch of stuff for the Tonight Show for many years, but now he was shooting in New York. And so it was really great to have the opportunity to, interact with him there. And then, so when I moved to town, he had been, he just shot Clerks 3 here last summer.
Yep.
My kids and I, every once in a while, will stop into the Quick Stop and just get a drink or, whatever. So it's like interesting to be a part of that world. And so then he bought the movie theater in Atlantic Highlands, and they announced that they were going to be doing a film festival. And so Ernie O'Donnell, who's the coordinator, he's his right-hand man who runs the theater. We were talking, and
Ernie O'Donnell is also in Clerks, and
he's in Clerks. He plays the personal trainer. He's in Clerks 3, which is great. Yeah. And so he's been instrumental in getting the theater back up and running. It's like a 5-screen theater in the town over. And so they've rebooted the whole thing, and it's coming along great. And so they were going to do a film festival at his podcasting studio, which is a couple towns over in a different town called Leonardo.
Yep.
And they realized when they opened the festival up for submissions, they got like 700 submissions. And so they realized they had to really figure out a venue for this. And the movie theater thing just made sense, and Kevin bought it.
Wow.
And so anyway, so I got to judge the festival, which was great. And so,
how does that happen? Sorry. No, is he like, okay, well, yeah, but I know a former Letterman writer, and I reached out to Ernie,
and I just said, hey, listen,
you asked for it.
So basically, I called Ernie and I said, listen, as a New Highlands guy, I'm a huge fan. I've supported this theater. I'm a fan of that movie theater. I said, if you need any help with the festival, let me know. And he's like, would you want to judge? I was like, absolutely. And the next day I got a link, and there was 700 movies. And it's like, he's like, the first batch is watch as many as you can until we can narrow down the first batch. And then for the final round, there was like 120 shorts and features that I got sent. And it was really, really cool. It was just a whole, just a diverse array of talent, horror, comedy, drama, really, really talented up and coming filmmakers. I saw some short films that were just dynamite, out of this world. So it was really fun to be a part of. And so they had the festival was this last weekend, and it was like 5 days. So I went and attended a couple of the blocks of the of movies, and then attended the awards, and it was really neat. And Kevin did a great tribute to this guy, Bob Hawke, who was also one of the judges, who was one of the guys who was instrumental in his journey from getting Clerks. He was getting Clerks.
Clerk. Yeah.
Well, basically, when he saw Clerks, he was one of the people, the early advocates who got it helped get it into Sundance.
Yes.
And it was just such a nice experience, and really fun to be, those guys are so fun, and it's just so fun to listen to Kevin tell stories, so
I'm going to throw this out. I want him on this show so badly. It's not even funny. Not only because he's got a Letterman connection. He was a guest on the show once, but also there was a time where he had the opportunity to have a top 10 made about him, and he didn't do it. I don't know if you know that story or not, and I'm not going to go into it anymore because I want to have him on the show, and I want to ask him about that.
Sure.
He regrets not having it done, with hindsight. If there's any way that we can get connected to Kevin Smith, oh my gosh, it'd be so fun to have him on.
Yeah, for sure.
My gosh.
And now you can talk about the remote we did with Biff, and
all that. Oh yeah, there's so much because
plus, his whole roster of people.
Yes.
You could talk to them about all of his movies and stuff.
That's the goal of the show. What I just did there is kind of blueprint the example of what the show is, because Kevin Smith was a gigantic Letterman fan. Like, I'm a big Kevin Smith fan. Any podcasting influence that I have is because of him. And when Smodcast came out, I was an early adopter of that show. And Kevin he's such an inspirational guy, because he's the guy that says, just like when he went and saw Slacker when he was 19 years old, and he's like, wait, this counts. And it kind of wrapped his mind around the idea that, I can do this. And he has perpetrated that to everybody. You want to do a podcast, go do it. And I just appreciate that about him so much, how he is so encouraging for people to do things. I want to tell him that this podcast doesn't exist. I've talked about the lily pads about the Letterman podcast. And if one of the lily pads was not there, this show doesn't exist. Kevin Smith is one of those lily pads. So, but that being said, folks like that who have a connection to Letterman in any way, big fans, you hear about how some of these up and coming comedic actors who are sitting beside Dave and have been warned very sternly, do not talk about your adoration to Dave to him, please. I want to have some of those people on this show so they can talk about the adoration for what Dave and company did. And Kev's one of those guys. So that's a very cool experience. That must have felt really neat being a part of that.
It was really cool. It was just, just a small part of that process. And just, for the community, I thought it was great, just sort of bringing people here and, seeing the young filmmakers accepting their awards. It was just really cool to see them get recognized. And obviously, I think they're going to keep doing it every year. So, I hope to be involved going forward, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. And I hope it just continues to grow. Like this podcast, it's one of those things where the pieces will start to fall into place. And then once one person does it, someone will say, oh, I'll do it too. You know what I mean? It just becomes this thing that grows and grows. So, and then there'll be this great archive you'll have of just this awesome.
It's the weirdest thing in the world. I wanted this podcast for years to show up. I wanted it to be there so I could listen to it weekly. Yeah. And it never did. And it never did. And then Alan died. And I had already become friends with Shecky at that point. Shecky's again another one of those very, very pivotal lily pads is Rick
essential.
Sheckman.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, I'm so grateful to have Rick Sheckman in my life. Like he is just he is just
Shecky has many memories of me walking to his door and leaning in the door when a writer has asked for some random piece of footage, and I would say, Shecky, do you happen to have footage of Bill Clinton on the phone, or do you have I need, girls in sequin dresses on water ski, you know what I mean? And he'd be like, I don't have that, but I have this. And, for many years, he was such an essential help for me,
Oh, I love it.
And I could just tell he'd like roll his eyes when I walk in the door. He said, what do you need now? So,
oh God. Yeah. And I love that about him. And
he was always super helpful to me. He was he was so nice to me and so helpful, because I was just floundering sometimes with like, I don't know the first thing about what I'm looking for here. And he would be so great. So
you and I are brothers in that. I have felt the exact same way. And if it wasn't for him, this thing wouldn't exist either.
Yeah.
And again, it was Alan dying, because it was like, are you kidding me? If someone was doing the Letterman podcast, Alan would have been a guest 5 times. Like he would have just kept like
Alan would have been a guest. He would have recorded your intro. Alan was the consummate professional. He was hilarious. He was such a pro. Like it was like he would just nail it every time. He was so good, and he was game for almost anything. There were a couple times he's like, I don't know about this, Jeremy, because I would bring him a script and he's like, I don't know. But then he was always such a good sport, and he would end up doing stuff.
You wrote stuff for him? Did you?
I wrote stuff for him. Yeah. But even before that, when I was, producing segments, I was definitely the one who sort of got him his material. But there were times I wrote stuff for him, but not as frequently as some of the other writers. But anything that I did write for him, he was just knocked it out of the park.
I don't know if you remember this remote. One of my very favorite moments of all time on Late Show was this remote where they come back from commercial break or whatever, and they're about to do something, and you hear this, Dave, and Dave's like, what is it, Alan? And he's wearing a sailor suit, and
oh my God, yeah,
and aren't we gonna do my sailor sketch? And Dave's like, I'm sorry, we don't have time. The sailor sketch has been cut. And Alan, I don't even think he rages at that point. I think he just goes off dejected. And then we see a remote or a taped piece of Alan's descent into madness. And he breaks the glass, and these white rabbits playing by Jefferson Airplane. And I want to find who wrote that and shake their hand.
Really great. I don't remember who did, but I remember that piece though. I mean, he could really sell the hell out of all of it. So good. Yeah.
Okay, I've taken so much of your time, and I did it. I got to the end of the episode being able to ask this question. It is Weiner, right?
Yes, correct. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no. Yeah. I thought it was. I wanted to make sure. But I can imagine having that name.
It's it presents some issues growing up, but otherwise it's all good. It helps to develop the comedy skin, so it's all good.
Jeremy, this has been so much fun for me.
For me too. Thank you so much for having me. I was flattered to be invited. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh my gosh. You anytime, open invitation anytime. Again, I want to have a writers roundtable similar to what Malkoff did with the Carson podcast. He would do that from time to time. I want to do that here too. Anything else that you want to say at the end of your first appearance on the Letterman podcast?
Oh, just thanks. I mean, this is just such a cool thing that you're doing. I'm excited to do a deep dive now and watch all these and sort of catch up with everybody. And then I'm happy to anything you need along the way, let me know. And at some point, I will dig out that box so we can go through it and figure out what other weird stuff I got. I think I have a couple of things too, just like odd writery things, like maybe a couple of dinner menus that the writers defaced at some point, that might have some funny jokes we could talk about. So,
oh my gosh. Yeah. That episode is very appealing to me. The moment you're ready, standing invitation, like next week over the holiday. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Whenever you want to do it, we'll do it. Thank you so much for taking time. And again, I say to all of you, whether it's in the first email or on air, thank you for helping to create some of the gray matter pathways in my brain that have made me the odd human that I am. Like, I swear to God, man, that show is so entrenched in my heart. Everything that you guys did, going through life, it was one of those things at the end of the day, no matter what I was doing, I always had that to look forward to. And I just want to say thank you so much for your contribution to that. It means the world. And I'm so excited to see what's up for you next, man.
Well, thanks. And thanks so much for saying that. And thanks for having me. And I share those sentiments exactly. It was like a beacon of light at the end of the night. It's just, it's such a great thing to have been a part of. I consider myself very fortunate. So thanks so much, man.
Oh, no problem at all. Okay. I'll do a quick outro and then we'll say our goodbye privately if you're okay with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. Well, there we go, everybody. This is why we do the show. I love this experience so much. We talk about the imposter syndrome. I can't believe I get to be the guy that does this. I'm so grateful. And I'm not alone. I want to thank every single person who helps contribute along the way, who helps support along the way, who helps fact check me along the way. Everybody, this Letterman podcast community is growing. It's so fun to watch it grow. I'm going to say it till I don't have to say it anymore. And believe me, I'm going to stop saying it a lot sooner than a lot of other podcasters say it. But until I have to, please please share, please subscribe to this podcast. Let's get us to that place where I don't have to say that ever again. And of course, we have one sponsor on the Letterman podcast, and that is Rupert G and the Hello Deli. Go to hello-deli.com for your only source of official Late Show with David Letterman merchandise. This has been another episode of the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you and good night.
Overcoat and underpants.